I had intentionally knew I needed a community, because I was like, okay, if I'm going to stay married, but we're separated, but I want to become sexually active again, that doesn't fit into the world of monogamy on the escalator. So what am I now? And so I really was like very purposely looking for community.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from all over the world to hear their personal journeys of self-discovery through the lenses of love, sex, and relationships.
Our mission is to show people that they're not alone and to inspire them to embrace their true selves so that together we can open minds and live authentically without shame.
We believe everyone's story is powerful and beautiful, yet it's important to remember that everyone does life a little bit differently and that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we aren't doctors. Please consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 347. We're Finn and Emma, and today we have an incredible conversation with Kathy. Kathy has been exploring non-monogamy for the last several years, but before that was in a monogamous relationship for over a decade. However, she has always been a bit rebellious and unconventional and pushing against social norms. We have a wonderful and powerful conversation with her about her journey today.
Yeah, as Emma said, this is such a beautiful conversation and a huge shout out and thank you to Kathy for coming on. Kathy is also a member of our virtual community, which we've been running for the last 4 or 5 years. We'll tell you about that later on, but we just wanted to make a note up front that Kathy is a member of the community. You will not be confused about that throughout the interview. She mentions it many, many times. Unpaid, unsolicited. So thank you for that, Kathy. We really appreciate it. And yeah, I think as we say in there, this is sort of a flavor of the type of amazing people that you will get to hang out with all day if you are part of our community. A couple other things that we wanted to mention up front here. First of all, part of Kathy's story, there's sort of 2 components that we wanted to talk about up front. One is that she talks about how she had a misdiagnosed STI that actually went for about 20 years thinking that she had an STI that turns out was not. So she will talk in more detail about that. But part of this conversation, she also talks about how she really does not like using condoms. And so she sent us an email after we did this saying like, hey, I really wanted to be clear with people that like, I don't like them. That's true, but I still use them and I still have all of the necessary conversations with my partners, and that actually condom usage had nothing to do with the STI misdiagnosis, all of those things. And so we just wanted to say up front on behalf of Kathy that is the facts.
Yes.
The other thing we wanted to do was give a potential trigger warning. I don't, I guess, think it necessarily needs one, but we just wanted to be extra cautious. So Kathy talks later on in the interview about how she had blocked out some childhood sexual trauma. She does not go into what that was, but really just sort of talks about how that came up for her after she had her child when she was in her late 30s, early 40s. And so this plays a role in her sort of becoming who she is today. So we just wanted to mention that up front in case that's something that might be triggering for you later on. Again, she does not go into details of what that looked like or really talk too in depth about it, but
we wanted you to know it's coming.
Yes. So with that, I believe we have covered everything up front except for one more huge shout out to Kathy for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And with that, we're going to jump right into the interview for anybody who is a premium subscriber. And for the rest of you, we have a couple of short announcements, and then we'll get you right into this amazing conversation.
First up, if you're not familiar with the premium subscription, it's a way to skip these announcements up front, but don't worry, you still get important dates in the outro. To sign up for the premium subscription, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, scroll down on the homepage, and you can sign up right there. One of those important dates that you will also get in the outro is that upcoming here in July, it's now July 15th through the 21st is the week of visibility for non-monogamy. And we are doing a workshop on July 17th from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific. It's a free workshop. We're really excited about this. And it's called, Is There a Right Way to Do Non-Monogamy? To sign up, again, go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, and click on the banner at the very top of the homepage. You can't miss it, and sign up for free and join us on the 17th.
Yes, and time's a ticking. That's just 2 weeks away from right now.
Yes.
You don't want to miss it. we'll be there.
We will. We're excited about it.
All right. The other big dates we've got coming up that we want to tell you all about are September 13th to 15th this year. So just a few months away. We have an in-person community retreat happening out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Again, Kathy's going to tell you all about the virtual community and how amazing it is. But people from that community will be descending upon the Bay Area for the weekend for an incredible lineup of workshops and events and just time together. So if you're looking for a community, we would love to have you join our virtual community, which then makes you eligible to join the in-person retreat out here. All of the information about what that looks like can be found on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Click on the community tab. There will be a link right there at the top where you can learn more about all of the things we're offering during that weekend. And you can also then apply and join the community down below that.
Yes.
All right.
Last but not least, our favorite way to get tested for STIs, it is stdcheck.com. You can use the links on the resources page of our website to get $10 off, making a 10-panel test only $129. This is a service that Finn and I use. We love it, and we think it's great because it's so simple and fast and discreet as well.
And that's why we tell you about it every freaking week.
Exactly. And by using those links on our website, you do support the podcast as well. So thank you in advance. We really appreciate it. And thank you to anyone else who has used those links. We, again, really appreciate it as well. Plus, the best news is you get to know your STI sexual health status.
That really is the real reason to do it.
Yes.
Not because we get a little bit of money or you save $10, but so you can be a better sexual health advocate out there in the community.
Definitely. And last, but I already said this before.
Yeah. Well, one more time.
One more
for real.
thing. The actual last thing, a reminder, reach out to us, send us a voicemail, send us an email. We would love to hear from you on the contact page of our website. You can find all of that information. And with that, I think we're ready to go and talk with Kathy.
I have one more thing.
Go for it.
Just wanted to say that by sending in an email or a voicemail, you can also offer yourself to come on the show just like Kathy. You don't have to be a community member. You don't have to be a content creator like we often have. You just have to be you. And we would love to talk to you or anybody you know about your amazing story.
Yes, very true.
So now you can reach out to us with full confidence that we will also solicit you to come on the podcast. Potentially.
And now
for real.
We're going to go and talk with Kathy. Welcome to the podcast. We're delighted to have you here, Kathy, and can't wait to dive in and talk today. Thank you. We've known you for a little while. Thank you for being such an amazing member of our community. And just thank you for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so happy to be here. And I just want to thank you both for being my favorite community builders and leaders. And I love being a community member.
Yes. Well, thank you, as Emma said. And for anybody listening, this is the type of delightful human you would get to hang out with if you spent time in our community online. So we welcome you. We invite everybody there. But before we convince you, Kathy, can you introduce yourself for us, for the listeners, for all of the future community members?
Yes. So, and I've actually been a member since late August 2022. So, it's been a fun time.
It's been that long. Wow.
Yeah, it's awesome. Awesome. Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years. Yeah, about a year and a half. So I live in the Northeast. I am just turned 49. I'm a very proud mom. And actually one of my friends that I met in the community, gave me the label domestic leader, which I love that term. So life is kind of giving me the opportunity to really, zone in on being a mom right now, which I'm so thrilled about. My son had just turned 13. And I am bisexual. I discovered that before all these other terms came out. So, in my 20s, that was the choice. You were either bi or straight. And now there's like pan and all these other terms and everything. So sort of open to whatever alchemy comes my way. Very sex positive, grew up very sex positive. But also then mixed with like a lot of other sexual repression and traumas and things like that. So yeah, and I'm very artistic and I'm a visual learner and I sort of think in visual terms too. So that'll probably creep out as I give examples for things. Yeah.
Perfect. We look forward to the storytelling.
Yeah, I was going to say, Faniel likes metaphors.
Can we do some metaphors today, Kathy?
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like, I mean, it's wonderful to hear that you had such a sort of sex positive and open-minded upbringing and all of the things, and that, you know, you were even able to, sounds like, embrace bisexuality back in your 20s. I'm curious, at what point did sort of different relationship styles or alternative relationship styles or even non-monogamy start to come into your worldview?
That's such a good question, because that's actually what I've been thinking about, is like, how early was this normal? Because my sort of byline in the community is all forms of non-monogamy have always felt normal to me. And so when I really thought about that, and actually just kind of backing up, so the way that I view non-monogamy and monogamy and all that, so I sort of see everything as a big playground. So anything to do with relationships and sexuality. And actually there's sort of like, you know, the kids area. Mm-hmm. That obviously is very protected and should be from, you know, boundary crossings and things like that. Obviously, it doesn't always happen. But kids are just as sexual, like humans are sexual beings, right? Like we're just built that way. So I don't see it as like door number one, door number two. I see it as, like a huge playground with a lot of choices.
Yep. Yeah.
And so, you know, adults go on one side, you know, and can choose everything that they want. And it's just sort of how life unfolds. And I do believe also in changing seasons of life, and that seasons definitely come and go. And sometimes you could love to hop on this ride at the playground or play over here. And sometimes you want to just hang out on a bench and see what's happening. And so it's interesting because one of my parents was not sex positive, and the other one was almost like inappropriate with sexuality. But I myself always felt sex positive. So like I've always thought like the body is normal, like pleasure, you know, like pleasure seeking, like just everything felt normal to me. Nothing felt like when people said something that was shaming or anything, I knew something was wrong with them.
Yeah. Even in the early days of being in the playground, it sounds like.
Yeah. So the fun story, I have an older brother who's 2 years older, and in the summertime, it's really hot, and, you know, little kids look the same, you know, chests look the same. And so he had his shirt off with his friend because it was summertime. And I was like, well, why can't I take my shirt off? Like we look the same. So I took my shirt off, and he was okay with it until like but his friend was there. And so he was getting embarrassed because the friend was like, what is she doing? And I might've been 5 or 6, you know? Mm-hmm. And I just was like, but I look down at my chest and I look at their chest and I'm like, we look the same. Like, yep. Why can't I take my shirt off and be cool under the deck like you are, you know? And he just was like, come on, you can't, you know, like it's not the way you're supposed to do this. So I always questioned, like, why can't girls do some of the same things as boys? And like, what is that like boy girl expectations? And I never liked wearing dresses. And so, yeah, so I just always had an idea of like, wait, someone else made the rules around this and didn't ask me. And so I'm not going to follow them within certain, obviously I had to within certain parameters,
but you weren't happy about it.
Yeah.
No, I have always been a bit rebellious. I've always been very unconventional. And, you know, I obviously had to do it within certain parameters, because also there was also a very strong, like, this is the way you do things sort of upbringing as well. But then mixed with, so I grew up in the 80s, which is, you know, kind of a crazy time with sexuality. Like there was very sort of, I was looking up the appropriate age for movies I watched with the family growing up. And like some of them are like eyebrow raising rated R's and things that we watched we would watch like Disney. Yeah. And then like these other movies that like are just so not appropriate. Nudity, sexuality, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just in your orbit too.
Yeah. And there was always like a weird mix of, you know, there was always like parties, like neighbors coming over and parties, and the kids weren't sequestered. I mean, it was all kind of just happening at the same time. So I was remembering this morning that somebody was having a birthday party, one of the husbands, and my parents hosted, and someone had hired, I think his wife had hired a belly dancer. And so she was getting ready in our bathroom, and I got to watch her like put her makeup on and put all her stuff. And then all the kids just sat around with the adults and watched her perform for him this sexy belly dance. Like it just was like it was just part of it. But then at the same time, it was also like this unspokenness of how you're supposed to behave and what sex is, and very mixed messages around. Like I remember when Madonna's Like a Virgin song came on, and my dad would like bump into furniture trying to get to the radio to shut it off, you know?
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, but
put it
we
off
just,
as fast as possible.
yeah, but then it's like, wait, family time, we just watched like Police Academy movies with like simulated sex scenes. Like what? Like it was so confusing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see how that would leave a kid confused.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so where does that take you as you you come out from under the porch, you have to put your shirt on.
Yeah, exactly.
And that sort of leads, I mean, obviously not right then leads you into it, but where does it sort of take you in terms of then starting to date or starting to maybe look at relationships sort of with that same questioning eye that you have everything else?
Mm-hmm. Well, I always knew that I was attracted to boys and girls, but I didn't know what it was called. And so, but I also wasn't really keen on relationships, really. Like I had crushes all the time. So I was in love with George Michael, and that was before he came out as, as gay. And, so I always had crushes, but I also knew that I was attracted to girls, didn't know what that was called, knew it was sort of not right, but didn't care. So I was in love with George Michael, like hopelessly in love with George Michael, was in love with Wham actually. And so I had his picture on my wall, and I had Alyssa Milano on my wall because I was in love with her. And I remember at one point my brother laughing and saying, why do you have a picture of a girl on your wall? And I was like, because I want to, because I like her, because whatever. Like, I just always put it as like, look, if you have a problem with it, that's your problem. It's not my problem. But in terms of high school, like I never dated. The whole attitude around it was like, I could feel, everybody was talking about everybody's, sexual activities. And that just really was not my style. It just was like, it just felt like nothing was private, and it just felt like it was very overwhelming. And on top of all that, there's a history of sexual trauma in my family. And so that sort of kept me very, very cautious and very scared on a lot of levels in terms of like the whole thing. And so I just sort of knew that between knowing I wasn't straight, or like I wasn't, my sexuality wasn't the same as like other straight friends, kind of helped me just sort of like get okay with the fact that I wasn't doing the standard rubber stamp thing that everybody else was doing. And so I even went to senior prom stag, and I was totally fine with it. Like I just really centered in myself. Even though obviously I wanted the whole package of like a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever, but.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like in some ways, Kathy, in like what I took away from this is sort of, it wasn't that it wasn't something you were interested in necessarily. It feels to me like you had this knowing that like, if I do it now, it's not going to be right. Like this isn't the right time. These aren't the right people. And this isn't the right space for me to like be able to lean into this part of life in the way that I want to.
Yeah. And there definitely felt a loss. Like there was still that push pull of like longing for it,
Yeah,
but then
totally.
kind of like looking at around of like who was to choose from. And I was like, there was no alchemy.
Yeah.
And then I just was like, yeah, I sort of, I grew up in a smaller, closer community, and I knew I wanted to leave. Like I knew I wasn't going to be the person that was going to stay in my hometown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially once I got to senior year of high school, I was so grateful that I had the freedom to just do whatever I wanted to do. And I've always been a late bloomer. So like I didn't start masturbating or solo sex until I was 18. And then when I did, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing ever.
Found a new part of the playground.
A new part of the playground. It was amazing. And then I didn't have sex with anyone else until I was 21. So I was definitely a late bloomer, but I was okay with that. I mean, I sort of had to reconcile myself of like, okay, I was watching everyone else do their thing. I knew that wasn't for me. There was some sadness around it and some loss around it. But at the same time, as much as I wanted it, I didn't want what was available. It's almost like now that I've bought a house, I learned that hard lesson of like, okay, you can have your dream house, but then you have to look at what's available in the zip code you want to live in. Like it's just reality meeting fantasy kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great example.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of, I think what I was trying to what it kind of felt like to me was, I know I want a house, but this isn't the high school. These people aren't necessarily my people to foster what's going to feel good. So I'm going to wait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't think if you asked me that at that age, I probably, I don't know if I would have just been like, yeah, it just doesn't feel comfortable. Like I always honored myself, which I'm looking back, I'm so proud. Like I've just always been very centered in who I am. And actually I used to interview all my, all the women friends, and I would ask them, have you had sex? Yes. Have you had an orgasm? That was my always second question. Have you had an orgasm? And they were like, then they would just tell me horror stories of like, everything be, like opposite orgasm, and of course, like the first time for a woman is very painful or can be painful. Mm-hmm. And I just was like, yeah, no. So I also grew up watching like Three's Company.
Yeah.
So it's a man with two female roommates, and my little 5-6-year-old brain just like would have fantasies about that. So I also just grew up with like, wow, group sex sounds like a lot of fun. And, and I just wasn't seeing, like everything was just so rubber stamped, like boy, girl, now I know it's the relationship escalator, like you date and then you stay together and then, maybe you break up when you go to college, but then, you're just, and I just was like, that's just not, I didn't know at the time that wasn't who I was. I just knew that I was just different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so where did that take you?
So, I had a lot, what's lovely is in college, I had a lot of fun experiences, again, late, like not till senior year. Everything was sort of like at the end. And then in my 20s, I had a lot of fun. And I guess like looking at it, you could say it was non-monogamous. It's sort of like that unspoken. I like the word unspoken and we didn't have the terms back then either. So like in the 90s, late 90s, it was hookup culture, exclusivity wasn't expected. But I always had like it was like a friend of a friend, it was never a stranger. So I always say like, I date my friends. I very, actually the current situation that I'm in, like beautiful relationship that I'm in is my first sort of like stranger danger, like adventure. So I just had a lot of fun sexual experiences that, and not like a huge amount. Like I think sort of penis and vagina partners, I've had maybe 6 or 7. But outside of that, I've had a lot more. So I just really honored having a lot of playtime that didn't necessarily have to go all the way or have to be penis and vagina. Like I was very, very blessed that I had people that were just fine kind of at my slower limits of things. Mm-hmm. And got to play with things. So that was so I got to play and I got to experiment and I got to have like a really lot of fun. But I also got what I thought was an STI.
In your 20s?
Yeah, in my 20s.
Yeah.
So basically I was fooling around with someone and he had long fingernails. But he was like sort of playing with my pretty delicate parts. And afterwards I was like, God, something felt like scratchy and I was like, well, maybe he scratched me or cut me or something. And I kind of checked it out. And I always been very like focused on my body. And I was like, what are those? And it's like these little, just sort of like variations. And so then I was like, what is this? And again, it was late 90s. And so, I actually now I know misdiagnosed with genital warts. But at the time, multiple doctors said, yep, that's genital warts. I even got treated for them, which is horrible. And especially back then, I mean, literally you're just putting like acid on your vulva.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then of course I sat all day at a desk job and I was just like, oh my God. But I will say, like, the medical community just really dropped the ball on that one. Like, it was horrible. And they were trying to shame me and all kinds of stuff, and I just wasn't having it. But I will say the most beautiful thing coming out of that is I had 3 or 4 lovers with the diagnosis that were amazing, you know, because I was like, had the shame of like, oh my gosh, like, I can't just like hook up with someone. Like, I have to have this conversation now, you know, like I have to say like, well, hey, I have genital warts. Like, I have this thing. And all of them were just like, okay, let's see. And like, they're like, well, we'll just work around it. And one of them, the most memorable one was, this gentleman who was so lovely. And he said, well, that's totally fine because I don't have penetrative sex. You know, I don't want to have an oops child. And, you know, he was a physician's assistant. So he knew a lot about the body. And he was like, yeah, I don't trust condoms. And yeah, I don't trust the pill. I don't trust any of that. So let's just have fun anyway. And we had a really, really like adventurous time working around the challenge. And he actually had afterwards, he was like, can I see them? And I was like, sure. So like I opened up and and he was like, you have such a pretty pussy. And he's like, wow, those are kind of cool looking. And like, it just was the most anti-shaming experience ever.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Wow.
To be able to have those people like reinforce that anti-shame for you in that, it's just so incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the message, if anyone has an STI, because I think the messages around STI, like prevention and testing and all that is awesome and it's required. However, you know, I feel like we need to talk more about like, okay, well, what if you live with one and how, like, actually, what do you do? So like he fingered me to the point where I fell off the bed. He came with me and we just kept going, you know, it was like amazing. Like I gave him oral and he kind of kept saying like, oh, I wish I could give you oral. He's like, but you know, it's all good. And we had a great time. Another one that became one of my first serious boyfriend after I told him, and of course I say it sort of like, well, you know, I have to share this thing, you know, you're sort of quiet with it, like expecting the worst, expecting like, okay, I'll go home now, you know, expecting they're going to say like, ew, you dirty, you know, whatever, like go home. And he was like, hold on. And he like ran to the kitchen, ran back and held up saran wrap and said, how about this? Will this work? And I was like, yes. And it just like blew my mind. Like it just blew my mind, like how cool people were. And it just reinforced it. Like, okay, I'm a sexy thing, you know, like they still want to have sex with me, you know?
Well, right. And it doesn't just boil down to one thing, like one part of your body is what they're into, right? There's more to Kathy than just that you can show up as a whole person, as a whole partner and still have tons of fun.
Exactly. It was so affirming to my attractiveness, to my desirability, to my sexuality. And it just introduced such an element of play. You know, it was another part of the playground that just sort of happened. I mean, it was a strange gift because, I think I also knew like I had done a lot. I'm sort of a researcher ahead of time. And so I feel like I had done a lot of, research asking girlfriends and things like that, where like they just jumped into having, you know, getting rid of their virginity and like having penis and vagina sex. And it was like, I didn't hear anybody enjoying it.
Yeah.
Like I did not hear one woman say like, oh my God, it was amazing. That was so great. I can't wait to do it again. Like it was so not that. And so, and also actually backing up. So in middle school, I was introduced to, the Clan of the Cave Bear series by Jean M. Auel, Auel. The first book is a huge trauma trigger and like spun me out because there's a terrible sexual assault. However, if you can get through that, the second book is like, you know, mutual orgasms. Like it's just, so I'm like 12, 13 years old reading about like amazing sex. And then the third book, I think there's 5 books total. In the third book, they introduced non-monogamy. So when you were asking like, what's on your landscape? Like, so at 12, 13 years old, it was a book that was, that's based on sort of like Neanderthal men and then like current modern humans and how they meet in the Ice Age. And their spiritual premise was the Great Mother. So it was like goddess based. So I'm 13 years old reading about this goddess based society where they have fertility rituals and celebration rituals where like, once a season, you get to just have sex with anyone else in the cave that you want to. And so it was, and of course there was some emotional fallouts, you know, because some partners got jealous that other people were with other people, but it was an acceptable cultural norm to be non-monogamous, you know?
Right. And at middle school age.
Yeah. Middle school, which then on top of that was mixed with like intergenerational sexual trauma that was coming out. So it was such a weird mix. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really fascinating, Kathy, to hear sort of all of like the melting pot that formed what launches you into your 20s into this sort of, like you said, it was a very sex positive exploration. It wasn't just heavily focused on PIV sex. And again, not that it would be anything wrong if it was, but I'm curious, throughout this like time in your 20s, were you were, sounds like, having very intentional conversations about a lot of things, about sex, about health, about STIs. Were you also having the conversations with these partners about like how many of them you were seeing, what it looked like? I know you said you didn't have the exact wording for it because it in some ways didn't exist yet, but were you having those conversations with people?
No. So that would be the unspoken piece.
Sure.
Yeah. So it sort of was like this unspoken non-monogamy, like unspoken that nothing was exclusive. And then when I wanted to get exclusive or I wanted to like really hone in on someone, until my first boyfriend in my mid-20s, like I remember there was, I had one lover that was just fantastic when I lived outside of in a metro area in the Northeast. And I'll tell you, like the best first kiss, like note to everyone, and it doesn't have to be the first, but like everyone should try this. It was so cool. So I remember sitting on this kitchen table. It was a big house with lots of housemates. They had porn night. Like they were very like open and, you know, and they kind of interviewed people like, you know, what type of drugs do you use? And will that match our you know, extracurricular activities kind of thing. Like it was wild.
The drug compatibility test.
Yes. And so it was a girlfriend of mine from college that was a housemate there. And I think there was like 6 or 7 people that lived there. And so anyway, I had gone to one of their big parties and him and I just had this like cool alchemy. And I was sitting on the kitchen table and I just, you know, we were flirting, but at that point, I just was like, you know, I'm just sort of open to whatever happens, you know, because I just was like, life is so unpredictable for me that I just was like, oh, whatever. He took a drink. He was getting, I think it was grape juice. He took a sip of grape juice. He leaned over, put his mouth on mine and gave me the grape juice. It was so awesome. It was so awesome.
And I feel like for some, like on that, I feel like it's either people.
That's a risky first move.
I was going to say, like, people either love that or would be totally turned off by that.
Yeah, but like, what a way to find out who's compatible in bed, right? Like,
not literally. That's not a one to try. You don't want to do that in bed. You'll stay in the sheets. That's the problem with people.
Yeah, it was so creative. Like it was so cool and it was so sensory and it was like so pleasurable. And it got rid of all like that first kiss nerves, you know, because I still get like nervous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another part of the playground. I love how just playful and like experimental and open to it you are. Even if maybe you're like, well, you know, I tried the grape kiss, not for me, but like what a fun experience, right?
Yeah. Yes. I've always liked, and I think that's the thing too. I think once I got in my 20s, I was like, okay, I'm tired of being on the outside looking in or being on the sidelines and interviewing. Like I just want to like jump in and have the experiences myself. So, but I definitely had some heartache at the same time because it was like, I remember, so I wanted to dive deeper with him, you know, like sort of more exclusively. And so, I just said like, oh, I really like you and da, da, da. And he said, I like you too. But he was sort of gearing his life towards, again, this was mid-20s. So he was, going to be moving actually across the planet to another country. But to your point, I've always been very open and honest. I don't know how not to be. And so, although sometimes if I'm vulnerable, obviously I can not speak up. So it's interesting. Sometimes I can't find my voice too. It's like with really important things.
Yeah.
But I had told him, I said, look, I really would love to, I like you. I'd love to do this and this and this. And he just said, well, I'm moving. Like and we did keep in touch. We actually still, I had found him, a couple years ago on a social media channel. And that was and he's married, has kids, and, it's just like a lovely memory. But we stayed in touch afterwards just on email. And it was lovely because he was able to just say, like I just said, I was like, you were scared. And he said, yeah, I was. And so a lot of times I've had situations where I meet someone and it's like, they feel like they could fall in love with me and it's just not the right time. It always was not the right time. So it was nice. I never felt rejected. I always was just more like frustrated with life in general, with timing.
Mm-hmm.
But then I moved across the country and I met my first serious boyfriend and he introduced me. So he was bi, although very closeted. But we got to have this like really cool queer relationship. He introduced me to BDSM. He really opened my sexuality up in like a whole way. But again, it was unspoken monogamy and it was unspoken relationship escalator. And that the unspokenness is really what caused, challenges. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to dive into that, but before we continue the story, I wanted to circle back if you're open to sharing about, you had mentioned around this potential STI that it was like you thought you had it. And then I'm guessing that that's not what eventually emerged.
Yeah. So kind of present day. So to sort of introduce present day dynamic. So I am, with a nesting co-parent, although he doesn't subscribe to that title. And Finn, you gave us that title, which I love, that label.
I offered it. You took it.
Yes. But see, and that's why to join the community, you get to have all these like lovely relationship shares and resource shares. So I'm currently in a slow divorce with my legal husband. And so in some worlds, I would call him a nesting partner. He would, we're separated living under the same roof. He's very monogamous and not interested in non-monogamy world whatsoever. And so, but we're just really slowly divorcing with the help of an incredible therapist who is friendly on all fronts, kink, poly, queer. He himself is a straight, man, but he's friendly with all of it. He has a master's in sexuality, which I was really, grateful that I found him, and I waited 4 years to get him. We were, just the way life worked out. But I have also a lovely, lovely, happy relationship now with a fellow community member, which again, unexpected and surprise, and wasn't seeking it at all. But I'm so grateful for it. And so we've been together almost a year. So as I was moving through the separation stages and, sort of like wanting to pursue. So I've been in therapy the couples therapy, for a little more than 2 years. And my couples therapist, who's, very sex positive, was like, okay, so it's been about 5 years since you've had sex, Kathy. Yeah, I think that's enough time. Like, how would you like to pursue your sex life now? And I was like, well, I just thought I'd wait till my son was 18 and then we'd figure out how to de-nest. And, that was the plan. Like, I just was going to suck it up and just be celibate, and kind of by choice, but by circumstance, which had happened in my life before. So I was like, okay, whatever. And so my couples therapist really was the one that said, no, I mean, sex is a good thing. So, what would you like? And he sort of opened that up. So when that happened, I was like, oh, well, shit. Like these genital warts that, I mean, they still look like they're on my vulva. My current legal husband, like, he didn't care about them. And so he was just like, wart's a wart, doesn't hurt, just a weird skin thing. Like, who cares? But as I started thinking about potential partners, I was like, oh crap. Like, I bet you they have different solutions now, cause it's been like 20 years. So I went to my, GYN, and I thought I'm pretty sure I had told him before, like, yeah, I have it. And so I particularly said, like, okay, I want to start being sexually active again. Like, what's the current treatment? And he looked at them and he said, no, those aren't warts. No, that's just how your skin, those are like little tags. And no, that's just you. And I took a selfie afterwards of like celebratory smile of like, oh my gosh, like 20 years later, I find out I actually do not have an STI. So yeah, but I'm also very a proponent of de-shaming it, whether or not I still had them or not,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you had that experience of multiple people sort of de-shaming that for you, and then to the point where you lived sort of unimpacted by them for many years. It sounds like before you met your husband, you were navigating it, you were having the conversations, and you were happy and healthy in a sexually active way.
Exactly. And I just thought like, oh, well, let's see. I also have been quizzing. I sort of been interested in my medical team, like how sex positive are they, and how open are they? And so, do they assume that my lovers are only men? Like what are the current, what are they telling people, And so, it was really cool because my newest GYN is so sex positive, and I'm also in perimenopause, so I don't ovulate every month. And so the whole pregnancy scare thing is just like, ugh. And, this is terrible to say, but it's just honest. Like, I don't like condoms. So, and I've been married for 20 something years and we don't use them. So it's like, oh my God, I have to go back to using condoms. Like they irritate my vulva, like whatever. So, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to do the like, oh my God, am I pregnant every month? Like anymore. Like I'm too old for that. And I'm tired. It's like, I always joke with my women friends. It's like, yeah, we have the dance of like, oh my God, I hope I'm not pregnant. And then sometimes it switches to like, oh my God, I hope I'm pregnant. And then, it's like, I'm just tired of the whole, like, I can't wait until I can't like have a baby anymore by Mother Nature. I'm like so tired of it. But she was, and I just told her, I said, well, if I don't ovulate every month, like, should I just pay attention to my body and sort of be careful with it and, just be aware, but just know what my risk is? And she was like, yeah. She said, obviously, your risk. You can get on birth control. You can use condoms. You can do all these things, but there's a lot. And I always call them the oops babies, like the midlife babies where, women will, think you're done because perimenopause is quite the trip. And then you can still get pregnant. And I actually had a coworker who was a oops baby. And so now he'll always say like, yeah, but now you'll always have my face to remind you of, oops babies are, and he was honest. He said, everyone told my mom to have an abortion. And, and he's an amazing human. So, and I'm pro-choice, as well. But, it's a whole mix of things. Yeah. Like having sex life again in your,
yeah, there's so much that goes into it, right? And even at 49, there's you reintroduce sexual health conversations, potential children conversations, all of the things like come back. It's I'm curious what that's like revisiting all of this or coming back to it, 20 plus years after. I'm guessing, did you kind of think it was done? It was over?
Yeah, it's funny because so when I got married, I was very honest. So we met in 2004, got married in 2006. And, I basically sort of said in 2017, like, cause I had experienced alchemy with somebody new for the first time and was like, whoa, like, what is that? And, it just really shook my bones. And there was a lot of things that were sort of already, kind of breaking into the foundation of my marriage. And my marriage, God bless them. I mean, we're working on being friends and we're doing a lot of repair so that we can have a healing divorce and be very amazing co-parents. That's our goal. But there was a lot of like, it helped. So joining the community actually just introduced me to so many helpful things. So like the relationship escalator, which I didn't know what it was or what it was called. And then once I learned about it and I actually bought a book, about it, it was such a relief because I remember being like, oh, thank you. Because I think I just thought at the time, like, okay, well, I want a family. I want a baby. I want a husband. I want the house. Like I want the package. And so this is what it's going to cost. It's going to cost my freedom. It's going to cost my sexual expression. It's going to cost, all these things. And I was willing to pay the price. I was willing to pay that cost. So then once I sort of realized it was like, oh, wait, I can do this again. I did feel a little like unsure and self-conscious at first. And honestly, that's why I found the community. So to kind of back up too, so the person that I had alchemy with, is married and, I was like, yeah, I'm not touching that, cause I'm like, my pleasure cannot be a source of someone else's pain. But flirting, I love to do. And so in my mind, flirting, people have different definitions of infidelity and cheating and all that kind of stuff. And again, different parts of the playground, right? Like to me, nothing's shaming. There's reasons why people do everything. And ultimately, I will always get my needs met. But I also really was curious about myself of like, why am I leaning towards, other people? Like, why am I, because I would flirt kind of more heavily with some people, or I would have what some people might describe as emotional affairs with people, because I'm very emotionally intimate I love emotional intimacy. And, even like straight girlfriends of mine and I are very emotionally intimate, but it can get funny when it's like a married man, versus like a straight single woman, so like, and if their wife doesn't know, or they're jealousy or all that kind of stuff. So basically through the years of that friendship, they planted a seed around this term, like ethical non-monogamy. And I was like, oh, huh. And so I looked it up and your podcast came up. And I have to say, I wasn't before a podcast person, because I'm a visual learner and my audio, it's harder for me to learn through my ears. And so podcasts were just not, I'd rather read a book, or I would read the transcripts. So like I love to read, because then I can just zoom real fast and speed read, whatever. So I found y'all. And what was so amazing, I was like, wait, this is just like this sweet, like 30 something couple that like you would never think looking at them that is like doing all these like fun, sexy things. And I was like, huh. And what did it is I listened to the podcast with We Got a Thing, the interview that you had with the podcasters from We Got a Thing. And Finn, you had impressed me so much because you were so invested in making sure that your podcast community was welcoming and safe. And they were talking about the Not Safe for Work channel. And you were talking about how you hesitated because you didn't want anything to be unsafe, and you wanted to make sure it was safe space. And that I was like, okay, I can feel safe with someone who understands what that is and is building a community in that way. And I had intentionally knew I needed a community, because I was like, okay, if I'm going to stay married, but we're separated, but I want to become sexually active again, that doesn't fit into the world of monogamy on the escalator. So what am I now? And so I really was like very purposely looking for community. And then it was like all of a sudden it happened really fast. And, and so I've found so much resources by joining you. And so that's what helped me in the beginning figure things out.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's really sweet.
But it sounds like, Kathy, I didn't even really know this necessarily. So when you joined our community, it was sort of at the fringes of you trying to figure out, what am I going to do with a close to 20-year partnership or 20 plus year partnership?
Yeah. So basically it was, let me think. I had started couples therapy and I'd had it for about 6 months. And I think what it was too, so the way our couples therapist worked was, and we were very clear, like, okay, the intention is to divorce, which right there people thought was weird. And I'm like, I'm always used to people thinking I'm weird. It's like, why are you hiring a couples therapist to get divorced? You're not getting back together? I'm like, no, we're not getting back together. But I just knew that we had so much repair to do. And I knew if we could take the opportunity to do it then with each other, there would be so much we wouldn't have to carry into our next relationships on an intimate level.
Yeah.
And so what the couples therapist did, he met with us together, and then we met separately. And when I met with him separately, and this is all Zoom, now, when I met with him separately, he really asked a lot of questions around my sexuality and what I wanted. And so I had said like, well, I really had a lot of fun with my first boyfriend with like BDSM and kink and all this stuff. And I didn't get to explore that in my marriage. Like there was a lot in my marriage that we couldn't explore. And just to note too, like if you look at like the top 10 things or 5 to 10 things that are like impact life-changing, traumatic on just life, like death, divorce, baby, house, et cetera, et cetera. Like we had almost like cancer. In the first 5 years of being married, we had like almost all of them.
Wow.
Like it just like other people had marriages where like maybe they hit one or two at the end.
Mm-hmm.
We got everything in the beginning. So we had parents with cancer. We had a parent that died. I had 2 miscarriages. We had a baby. We bought a house. We had immigration. I mean, it just was like intense for 5 years. And so we just were kind of on this hamster wheel of like life, you know? And so there just was so much to process. So and COVID had happened. And so I had lost my career. I had lost my industry. I had lost a whole community. And so I was grieving that, for like a year and a half. And I had just finished doing some really intense, trauma recovery work on my own. And so then I just was like, I really need community. And so I joined the community to just try to find a tribe where I could feel like I was accepted for doing something really unconventional with my marriage and with the divorce and with, I still didn't think I was going to have any personal sex life other than my own like very rich solo one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Kathy, and this, I think, question is around, I mean, it's because I can hear people out there. I hear all of the critics saying, well, at a point where your marriage was tested to the max, you turned to non-monogamy. And perhaps if you had stayed monogamous, especially with a husband who you've said is very monogamous and this isn't what they want, do you think that was it salvageable at that point? If you had turned inward, said, nope, monogamy, we're going to do it. From where you stand, do you think that would have done it for you?
No. So basically my husband, when we got married, he knew I was bi.
Okay.
And he just kept saying like, oh, later, we'll explore those things later. And so I sort of put my own needs aside, you know, because I thought that was just the price I had to pay. Mm-hmm. But I've always felt, that I want the option to be non-monogamous. But in terms of like choosing monogamy, so since I was 14, I was interested in swinging.
And not the playground kind.
Although both. I'm 5 feet tall, so I can fit on swings, and I do. I do go swinging on playgrounds for real. Yeah. So I just, it was one of those things where, again, like I didn't have time to really pause. But I knew that I was I was still sort of flirting past certain boundaries that probably, if my husband had known about them, he would have been very uncomfortable. And so, it was like dancing around that. And I sort of investigated for myself. I read Esther Perel's books, and I really dove into like, what is it about me that's sort of leaning towards, other people? But it was really the alchemy I had with this one person, mm-hmm. That I was like, oh my God, I'm really on the verge of having an affair. And I don't want that on my resume, like for myself or them or, cause I grew up with people having affairs, and I don't have any judgment or shame around it. I think it's just, there's a lot of layers and there's a lot of reasons why they happen. But it's also very culturally normal to me. Mm-hmm. I grew up watching soap operas, mm-hmm. As a young kid, it wasn't, I didn't grow up I grew up where there was definitely sort of moral codes. But it wasn't like, it was whispered about or like, oh yeah, it certainly felt wrong, but it wasn't like, I don't know. It was like, it's wrong and it's still part of the culture.
Well, right. And it sounds like, just sort of true to form for you, looking at a thing that's sort of a norm and being like, well, everybody else is having affairs. I might as well do it that way. And but sounds like you went the route of, we're going to pull this out into the open, at least in some way, and do it different. We're going to get into therapy as we deconstruct our partnership and repair it. Like, I think that's an amazing pivot.
Yeah. I really feel like there was parts of me that still felt, so I do follow the model internal family systems with like parts work. So like, mm-hmm. Let's say a part of me still very much felt like emotionally, maturity wise, I was like 14, mm-hmm. In terms of relationships. And so I really once, and that's kind of how I felt. Like, I honestly felt like I was 12 again with this like crazy alchemy I had with this person. And it just blew my whole world because first of all, I just never thought, it's like that stereotypical, like, I never thought I would feel like so in love again or feel these feelings again or feel like, I mean, now I know it's NRE, new relationship energy. But just it was palpable. Like everyone around us thought we were having an affair because it was like electricity was like zooming in the space we were in. Like it was just insane. And I really took it as like, oh my God, I just made an Insta friend, and I knew what the boundaries were and I wasn't going to cross them. But my thing with boundaries, and I love flirting, is like, here's the boundary. I'm going to dance on the line of it, like I am going to enjoy myself flirting. But it was the first time that I was like, oh my gosh, like I could really slip into this. And so I really sort of I dove into the research of it so my mantra I have for myself is know thyself. And so I really was just like, okay, I need to figure this out because also backing up. So to sort of back up a little bit. So when my son was born, it was a very traumatic birth. And so I just my whole body sort of fell apart. It was an unplanned C-section. It was just really intense. And I definitely had, some people, like a Kundalini awakening sort of thing. So like a very sort of traumatic event that sort of dismantled who I knew myself to be. And I really thought that someone had put me in a new body, like after birth. Like everything was foreign to me. My body was foreign to me. It was such a strange feeling. And so, when my son was about a year and a half, I had started getting nightmares and flashbacks and all these kinds of things. So I started therapy and then found out that although other women in my family members had known that they had been sexually traumatized by another male family member, the whole story for me was that like, except me, that like I was saved or I was escaped or nothing had happened to me because I had blocked it all out. And so it wasn't until my son was like a year and a half that like stuff started creeping back up again. And I went to therapy. I was totally freaked out. So like basically my entire identity of who I thought I was in relation to sort of sexual trauma, the story had to then be rewritten. And so everything became rewritten. Like it was like this whole, like, I don't know if people have seen the movie Inside Out by Pixar. And there's a part in the movie where I think it's called abstract or something. They basically turn into shapes.
Yeah.
It's like they completely fall apart. And then you have to build yourself back up. And so I needed so much therapeutic help of like, okay, I don't know who I am anymore. The beauty of it was that like, okay, I get to pick. I had really good therapists that was like, okay, but now you get to decide like what part of your identity you want to keep, what part you want to get rid of, how to integrate it. And so it took years to integrate all that. So basically at the end, like so that was, like 2013. So 4 years later, I'm like still kind of in this like cool. So I've also gone to a shamanic healer and they do what's called soul retrievals. And so I had just had a soul retrieval, which basically brought back this little kid me that was like my sassy self, my like, so like the self that basically was like, I'm taking my shirt off because I can.
Yep.
Mm-hmm,
Yep.
mm-hmm.
Like she kind of got returned to me in this beautiful way. And literally within a couple weeks, I met this person that like rocked my world. And so it was just and I was pissed because I was just like, this isn't supposed to happen. Like, I'm not supposed to fall crazy love, crazy desire for someone who's not my husband. So I dove down deep into like, what is the source of like affairs or like cheating or all that kind of stuff, what's going on. And it just helped reveal to me of like, okay, here's what's happening. And I got to make a conscious choice. Like I basically paused everything and I just got to make a conscious choice of like, okay, I don't want to do that. And so basically that summer, it was basically a month later, I told my husband, I said, I'm on the verge of having an affair and I've not been happy for a really long time. And so what I usually say is if I had not had the huge amount of trauma that I've had, because I had trauma besides the sexual, like it is just, I score high on the ACEs. If I didn't have the trauma background I had, I probably would have tried to repair with my husband. However, introducing non-monogamy sort of as a cultural thing to him and him just saying 100% no, I'm just not wired that way, I still would have chosen the path that I'm on because I had to, because I knew then I would just open myself up to betray him, betray me. It kind of was just like, it was the only choice to really honor each of us.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the two of you just are not compatible in that way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and what's powerful about that too, Kathy, is it's not like you just, like, I hear you in some ways saying like, I've known all along, right? I kind of did things different all along, which sure. But also you woke up to an entire part of your life that you didn't know existed.
Right.
Yes.
Years and years afterwards. And so, as you kind of said, like, you were not even the person you thought you were, which is like, how do you reconcile that? Like, that's an earth shattering revelation to have in your, in your 30s at some point?
Yeah. Or 40s, actually. 40s. So I had my son, late 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 40s were something. Wow. Yeah. So basically so that was like 2017. And then I joined the community in 2022, and I joined the community, just feeling like, okay, I can happily flirt here. I am an exhibitionist. I love self-photography. I like being naked. I like sex. I like this. I like that. But again, I just had, a very rich solo sex life. Which actually, just to plug, I use shock rubs, which is they're crystal dildos from this woman, Vanessa Cuccia from New York City. And they're for healing and for just really amazing. So that I basically I also made a choice too. Like, am I going to heal sexual trauma with a partner or myself? And I purposely decided I wanted to do it on my own. Because again, I feel like the sex life I've had with myself has always been my landing spot, like has always just been the way I connect to myself, the way I connect to me. I sort of start there and then I introduce other people into it. Like I don't, I don't source it to other people.
Would you be open to kind of sharing what that journey looked like for you to heal? I mean, a massive sort of uncovering in sexual trauma on your own as you're in the middle of separating and opening a relationship.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
All at once.
Yeah.
I know. A lot, and it sounds like you took your time. Like it's amazing, and you've taken your time to go on this journey.
Absolutely. So that's the first thing is, so I've worked with a woman. I actually just ended the relationship, a 15-year relationship with a woman who I called my body worker. So I started with what I call couch therapy, which had its place. And then I just knew I needed something for somatic, for my body. And so I found a woman who did craniosacral therapy and somato-emotional release. And the very first time I met her, I decided I was going to take the leap and just be incredibly open and I trusted her right away and just be really honest. And so that's actually how all this stuff came out. Like my body had the memory. I did not. And so the Bessel van der Kolk, the body keeps the score. That's basically what it is. Like my body was talking. And so the only way that I could get back to my body was to really, kind of do it on my own. And I've always, so I've always been very feminist. I was a women's studies major. And so I just always was I was like, I'll be damned if somebody takes my pleasure away. I'll be damned. And so Esther Perel had said on one of her podcasts, a fellow sexual trauma survivor had said, the best revenge is the full expression of your joy and pleasure of your body. And so that's, that was my thing. Is like, no one's taking my pleasure away. Like that was my focus the whole way, was like, you can take other things from me, but like my pleasure is mine. And so I just was very focused on that. Honestly, to separate was a little bit of a relief because there was other issues going on. that didn't have to do with me and my stuff that later revealed itself that made a lot of sense. But it was a real relief to like have my own bed. Like I have a little twin bed. Everyone's like, why do you have the little kid bed? I'm like, because I like having a twin bed. I like being in my little bed again. I like being able to masturbate and not worry about like waking up the person next to me. For me, it was a relief to get back to me. And it actually is a pretty common thing. It's not unusual, I guess I would say, for sexual trauma survivors to need that space, to need that time away, to kind of put a hiatus, because it can be really jolting to be processing body memories. And it's jolting for both people. It was jolting for my husband. Like, the first time because I really was like, let's make love because I'm not letting this stupid trauma stuff get to me. And it was intense for him, to kind of know what was going on. And then like, how do we jump into the sex thing knowing that I could have, be triggered, at any point. Like, so I really had to learn my triggers. I had to learn how to manage my triggers. I had to learn how to, I read I read a ton of books. And the best thing that, other people had said was like, pause, stop, like pause sex, just, you can pause if you're having a minute for any reason and just saying like, I need a minute. I just need a minute. Like, I just need a minute to either switch gears, get a drink, go to the bathroom. So it really gave me permission. Like the whole trauma recovery was like giving myself permission for anything and everything.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Kathy. Like and I feel like, I know we said this at the beginning, but I feel like we've just like hit the tip of the iceberg of your story.
I know, volume 1.
Yeah, volume 1. And like, it's so rich and beautiful in the way that you've gone through this all and explaining it all and sharing with us. And I also imagine it's been very, very difficult in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had to have girlfriends tell me, because again, the whole time I'm raising my son, right?
Yeah.
And I'm working full time. I commuted to another metro area. So I had a 2-hour commute each day. So in the beginning, I was like, I'm fucking up my son. I'm fucking up my son, because you just feel like your just guts are hanging out. And then it's like, and it's life.
Yeah.
And, life is marching on and I'm working full time and I'm, my kid's in daycare and I'm an hour away and I'm juggling a wild job and, parentals are getting sick with cancer. And I mean, it just was like, it was wild. So this feels like, I just feel like life is just giving me such a lovely, opportunity to just, sit and reflect and absorb, just all the past few years. And joining the community gave me hope. I remember, I think I had left you guys a voicemail, at the very beginning of like, I was so grateful to land in the community that you've built and that you manage and so well while you're dealing with life on the outside too. Because it really gave me hope. It gave me so many options that I had thought were off the table for so many reasons. And it gave me resources and it gave me other people playing the way I had with that, just amazing. Like just an opening up a whole new world that I knew non-monogamy on some levels, but like not to it was a whole other part of the playground I didn't know was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing all that, Kathy. And I'm one of the things, and again, let me just say this. We've talked about how this was part 1 of many. So we don't have to put a bow on this today. As frustrating as that may be to people listening, I don't think that would be even close to possible. But one of the things that I just maybe sticks out to me is this push-pull that you've kind of shared with us for almost your whole life of, I'm not going to conform. I'm not going to conform. And not to say that marriage is conforming, but you kind of, it sounds like, knew who you were and yet lived in a way that wasn't, and then had to find your way back to it all while even in the middle of that, still saying like, this isn't me, but I'm doing it, but maybe later it'll be different, but okay. Like, I just feel like a lot of that tension in there of like, you knew and you kind of did it anyway. And I think that's just really relatable to so many of us, thinking like, maybe this doesn't feel right, but I've got to follow the path a little, but how close do I follow the path and not lose myself?
Yeah. And for me, I just really thought it was the price I had to pay for the husband and the baby. And even though I've met people who have done it different ways, I just felt like life was, so I'm also very, very spiritual. And, I just knew that there was very, like, I feel like my husband and I have had past lives together and that we go through the same sort of thing, of like, okay, here we are, we're, hurting each other again in another lifetime. And how can we repair? And that's why I'm so adamant. It's like, no, we are repairing this time because I'm not doing this again with you as we go on. So yeah, but I think, sometimes it's just the beauty of the journey where, in terms of when you finally say like, okay, enough's enough and I need to be me. And I knew actually, I really knew I had this weird feeling that like, if I didn't change things, that I was going to become ill in a very life-threatening way. Like, cause I could just feel that I was holding too much in of who I needed to be for myself. And, so that's why the alchemy I had with that one person was such a gift, because it returned me back to me in so many ways. And the shamanic healing returned me back to me in so many ways. And then to have, this wonderful alchemy with this relationship that I'm in now, which he hasn't told me I could say his name, but if you join the community, you can find out who I'm with. Even that, so that was hilarious because he reached out to me in February, a year ago, February. And I was so scared that I didn't get back to him until the end of March. Like I didn't answer until the end of March because I was like, oh no, like I had this feeling of like, that's more than just flirting. Like I just knew I was like, that's going to rock my world. Like that's going to change everything. And I already have plans. Like I already had plans of like, okay, like, we're going to go through therapy and then I'll slowly get divorced. And then, I just was like, my personal life will be after my son's 18.
Yeah. You had the Kathy plans already set from what you thought how you had to do.
Yeah. It was like, it's a mini escalator. Like, I'm not ready to fall off it completely. Like I'll hang on and then I'll just, dabble in learning how other people are doing it. I was in research mode, right? I was research first.
Yep. Yeah.
And life had other plans. So, I reconnected because I was like, I'm like happy Kathy MC. Like I can't not answer back, it's like my reputation's on the line, like, so I finally like answered back and then it just like many things in my life happened. They just happened like very, very quickly. And so we just really connected and it was amazing. And this will turn into probably volume 2, but at the same time as we started a connection, he was going through a poly breakup. So like my introduction to like, non-monogamy was like, hello, you're in an open relationship and now you're smack dab into a poly breakup at the beginning. So you have NRE, he's got poly breakup, you're married, in a divorce, like all this kind of stuff. So, and we met Memorial Day weekend in person, and our first quote unquote date was at a hotel. I just jumped right back in.
Right into the deep end. Amazing. Well, maybe, Kathy, does that feel like a good place to pick up volume 2 of 17?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause then he can be on it too. Yeah. Awesome. Cause it's a fun story. Yeah.
Can I pick at one more thing back in time a little bit?
Yeah.
You made a comment a few minutes ago around feeling like you had to go down this path to get the husband and kid to go down this monogamy path. When you made that choice, even back then, did it feel like you were giving something up, or was that at that point something that you were excited about, looking forward to, that felt like the right path?
That's a good question. I always felt like I wasn't 100% me.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know what to do about it or how to do it.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not very religious, but I did get a little religious on behalf of my son at one point. It was like I was trying everything. So basically, one of the things that I do, I will try absolutely everything before giving up. Because I just never want to look back and say, well, if I just did that one other thing. And so I will exhaust something to the point of no return, and it will take me a lot longer than other people loving me want me to take in certain situations. I mean, even now the divorce, right? Like it's been 5, 6, 7 years. And I'm like, but my timeline, I'm just like, no, like and healing takes time, and that's always been my thing. Part of me definitely got tired of being so weird and unconventional and wanted just sort of like the happy package and kind of wanted to pretend that it was like, okay, let's just do this. And then maybe, second half of life, things will be different. But I knew something was definitely wrong. And that kind of did come out with couples therapy, that like something was definitely wrong before I entered the picture in our marriage, that has since been very healing to find out that it wasn't just me and my stuff and all that. So, and again, I don't know, sometimes for me and sort of my spiritual outlook is like, some things are kind of meant to be the way they're meant to be. And that, timing and everybody's journeys sort of happen, in funny ways and funny times and funny, sort of like I might be doing something in my 20s. Someone else might have that same experience in their 50s, like it's sort of like different experiences at different junctures for different reasons. Yeah. But yeah, I always felt like I did feel like at certain points I was betraying myself, and I could see where that was coming out sideways. And so when life sort of presented me opportunities to choose again, I chose me. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I think you pointed out something in there that, maybe got not necessarily overlooked, but we hadn't really touched on, which is, right, this isn't just you, right? You both had a life of histories and traumas and wins and losses and all of the things that brought you two together. And so you had yours uncovered. And again, this isn't your husband's sort of story or anything, but, suffice it to say, I'm sure he had his own world that he brought to the marriage. And then you have to blend those two together. And that's no easy feat. And you're probably both doing and giving up parts of yourselves to make it work. I mean, we all do that.
Absolutely. And that's actually what our couples therapist is helping us do, is really separating out like, okay, what did you bring to the table? What did you bring to the table? And, he was so kind because he said, because at one point I said, well, when do you bring this up? Like the second date, like when do you start talking about all these like historical things? And he was so kind and he said, you don't. I mean, it's just how things unfold. And, it's a matter of how you deal with them when they do come up. Yeah. And then what life is presenting. And he really has he's sort of the Esther Perel mentality of like, relationships have their course, and some people have them for their entire lives. And some people it's co-creating and recreating what that looks like and being able to really build it for yourself. So he really is such a safe space for us to, he basically is just like, what do you want? Like you two get to create whatever you want, regardless of what anyone else says, what other cultures say, what parents say, what loved ones say. Like you two are in the relationship. You two get to decide what works. And essentially he's told us like, I basically want each of you to ask for pretty much anything you want. It doesn't mean you're going to get it. It just means you can ask for anything you want. And then we kind of look at like, okay, is that something that the other person can give you or not, or you can get from other places or not, or you can give yourself. So it's a real skill that I'm taking forward in terms of co-creation. And that's actually been, the beauty of it is that my new relationship is currently just constantly co-creating. Yeah. So it's almost like I'm learning a new skill from the divorce therapy and immediately applying it in my new relationship, which has been really a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's that shift from so much of the like, these are the blocks you're supposed to use to build your life, and this is what it's supposed to look like because that's what everybody builds, to I tried to build that. I built it. It didn't work for me. It maybe fell apart and hurt me. Now I'm going to build it differently, and I don't care what your blocks look like. I don't care what you want me to build. I'm building with myself, and I'm building with the people that I choose this time. And it's a whole different thing that you get to create together. It's just, I don't know, that freedom to say, we can literally build whatever we want and it can look like whatever we want as long as the people on the playground are having fun together.
Yeah. And then also just knowing like there's just a lot of negotiating.
Yeah.
So like I also feel like there's room for renovations later on. Like nothing's fixed,
Yep.
like you can tear it down, you can build it back up. Because sometimes you have to try, right? Or sometimes like even just building a house, right? Like you hire a contractor and you're like, I want this. And they say, well, in order to do that, we'd have to do X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
Well, I don't want all those. So it's also giving yourself permission to say, oh, well, I thought I wanted that, but if the outcome is this,
Yep.
Maybe I don't. And that's actually been my journey with non-monogamy. It's like, in theory, I like all these things.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's like, oh, but I don't want that comes with it. Because, to me, everything, there is, nothing's necessarily free. I mean, we all have to make choices based on outcomes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally. So great talking to you.
I know. Yeah. I'm like, I just want to sit here and talk to you for like the next 3 hours.
I know. As I said, I have like notebooks full of notes. I'll have to do it again. Absolutely.
We will definitely do it again. And just thank you so much for all of this today and for being just the beautiful, amazing human that you are. Before we wrap up and say goodbye for today, is there anything else that you wanted to get out there?
I have so much, but what I will say is, everyone be gentle with themselves and each other. Life can be hard. Life can be amazing. Join the community because it is a source of hope. It really is a source of hope. And I would love anyone who aligns or has questions or follow up or anything, please join. I'm green light. You can send me a note and I would love to make new friends.
Amazing. You are a delight, Kathy. Thank you for being here and for everything you've shared with us today and for all of your unsolicited plugs about the community. So
yes.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day and we will talk more very soon.
All right. Thank you.
And we are back. Thank you, Kathy, again for your vulnerability and for sharing everything that you did. We just loved having this conversation with you and can't wait to get it out there in the world as well. And thank you as well for being such an amazing community member as too. Like it's just
human.
And human. Yes, exactly.
Even if you leave our community, we'll still think you're a great human.
You are an incredible human, and we're really grateful that you're in our lives.
Yes. I will also say really quick, I exchanged a few emails with Kathy earlier this week to get some photos for the show notes, which you should definitely go and check out. But she told me that she's definitely in for a part 2, maybe even a part 3, because she said, I'm already on to stage 3. She's like multiple episodes ahead of us in her story. So yeah, it will happen.
That's exciting. A few reminders of important dates coming up.
Yep. The first date is 2 weeks from today, July 17th, will be our Week of Visibility workshop that we have called Is There a Right Way to Do Non-Monogamy? It is a virtual workshop. It is free and you have no excuses to not be there. So we expect to see you there. You can sign up on our website, on the homepage, or anywhere on our website. There will be a giant purple banner at the top. You can figure it out from there. We would love to have you join us.
It is free.
It is free.
The other important date is a reminder of our upcoming community retreat, September 13th to the 15th. Again, you can go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, click on the community tab, and you can find out all of the information right there.
And next week, you wouldn't believe it, but we've got an interview coming right at you. This one is pretty fun. It's a bit of a riot. We talked to Billy Presida, who you might know from the Man Whore podcast. Super fun conversation, and we are excited to bring it to you next week. In the meantime, after you listen to this, definitely go check out a couple of Billy's episodes. So with that, we hope you all have a wonderful start to your July. If you're in the U.S., happy 4th of July to you all. We'll see you in a week.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.